Pietermaritzburg region in KwaZulu-Natal is home to some of the most famous battlefields that are an integral part of South Africa's history. Blood River, Isandlawana and Rorke's Drift all have special places in our history and provided the background for battles of a different nature, with round 3 of the Absa Off-Road Championship heading for Dundee.
Race headquarters for the Atlas Copco 400 were at the aptly named Battlefields Lodge on the outskirts of Dundee, with the event bringing top-flight competition to an area starved of national championship motorsport.
The only Absa Championship race held in KwaZulu-Natal was previously known as the Atlas Copco Sugarbelt 400, with headquarters at Eston on the outskirts of Pietermaritzburg. A major talking point as crews went through the normal registration process was what sort of terrain and conditions could be expected on a route that would run to a figure-of-8 format, with competitors competing east and west loops twice during the tough race.
Apart from sponsoring the event, Atlas Copco also run a 3-car team in the Absa series, with squad leader Gary Bertholdt putting a positive spin on matters.
Absolutely, great support from Atlas Copco, coming out here, sponsoring the event, showing the commitment to the sport, the amount they put in, and really putting their name behind what we see as a great opportunity for marketing in a fantastically well sought out area so far. So hopefully this Battlefields Atlas Copco 400 can be a great success.
Pietermaritzburg is home to the Ford racing team, with South African champion Chris Visser also in a positive frame of mind.
Yeah, I must say, left and drive, we actually doesn't bother us anymore. So we had a test session last weekend down in Pietermaritzburg, and yeah, the car's good, I guess. And we get gelling with the car at the moment.
Pressure was also mounting on the factory team Castrol Toyota squad to produce a first win of the season.
Yeah, and then, just looking at the terrain here, looks really nice terrain. Obviously quite hilly, but looks like there's some flat, quick sections. So I think it's going to, it's new for everyone, but it'll definitely suit the package that we've got.
After a 10-year hiatus, Dit Pitter and Chris Claessens are back in the Absa fold and leading their class.
Hopefully we can pull this one off. We need it. We're the first in the class for this championship this year. So we can pull this one off. We want to like to go to the desert race. That's the next one in 4 weeks. And well, the support are there, the sponsors are there. Hopefully we can pull it off.
There was also pressure for Baden Tyre Services pair Thomas Rundle and John Moore, who were leading the production vehicle championship.
Yeah, look, it's something that we've never found ourselves in before, but it's really fantastic leading the championship, something that we've wanted to do for a very long time, and it's nice to be doing it so early on in the season. You know, it's just important now for us to consolidate. You know, I'd love to win a race. I haven't won one yet, but I'm not thinking about that now. I really just want to consolidate and hopefully still be leading the championship come into the season.
3 Nissan crews in the top 5 of the Production Vehicle Championship recalled the halcyon days of the now-defunct Nissan factory team. Rundle and Moore held a 6-point advantage over Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson.
The draw for start positions on the Donaldson Prologue saw Henny ter Steege see to it that he and veteran former SA champion Hannes Grobler would lead away the production vehicle field in the diesel-powered RFS BMW X3. With the first 10 special vehicles scheduled to start before the production cars, Grobler wasn't unhappy about playing a pathfinder role.
No problem, you know, the specials ahead of us, there's probably going to be 8 or 10 guys ahead of us, and they'll probably clear the road. And I think to start number 1 in the SP class will be good for us. Last time we pulled number 1, we won the race, so hopefully it'll be the same.
The Donaldson Prologue is a race within a race. As is the case in Formula 1 and the other categories of motor racing, a good start position is a stepping stone to success. Races in the Absa series are scored in real time as opposed to starting cars at 2-minute intervals, and this has increased the value of a good grid position. Hannes Grobler and Henny ter Steege were followed off the start line by the Castrol Toyota of Duncan Vos and Rob Howie, and the Atlas Copco Toyota of Gary Bertholdt and Andre Vermeulen.
The prologue route was the same as the first loop of the race and covered 72 kilometers. The section started off at a fast pace and then tightened up through thorny veld and rocky outcrops. The route also included a riverbed section and crossed the main Vryheid Road.
Castrol Toyota team convincingly won the opening skirmish of what promised to be an intriguing battle. The experienced Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin made sure of pole position for the race with a controlled performance that saw them come in 51 seconds ahead of reigning South African champions Chris Visser and Jaapie Baardnost in the diesel-powered factory Ford Ranger. It was an encouraging start for Visser and Baardnost, but there were ominous signs for the opposition when the second Team Castrol Toyota crew posted the third fastest time, with Duncan Voss and Rob Howie only 2 seconds behind the Ford Ranger.
The first 3 crews all reported clean runs, and there were no problems for Hannes Grobler and Henny Terstegen, who were 4th in the RFS BMW X3. Behind the diesel-powered BMW, the Fossies Toyota Hilux, in the hands of father and son pair Willem and Dana Vos, lost time when they bogged down in a muddy section of the route.
A tow rope is a must accessory for off-road teams, and a friendly farmer came to the rescue of the Rustenburg-based crew. Spurred on by some vociferous advice from a small band of spectators, the farmer finally towed the Toyota onto firmer ground, with the forces eventually finishing 3.5 minutes off the pace. Northwest crew Malcolm Koch and Johan Burger in another Toyota Hilux were just 7 seconds behind the forces and had 16 seconds in hand over Gary Bertolt and Andre Vermeulen. Loss of communications between driver and co-driver hampered the Atlas Copco crew, and they opted for a cautious approach on a tough route that had a little bit of everything.
There was also a cautious approach from Toyota Dealer 400 winners Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson in the Regent Racing Nissan Navara. A maiden win on the Mpumalanga event took Whitehouse and Carlson into 2nd place in the championship, with consistency a forte for the Regent Racing crew. Behind them, Chris Deploy and Henk Janse van Vieren were giving the petrol version of the RFS BMW X3 its 2nd outing. The Pretoria crew were caught out by the same stretch of mud that delayed the forces, and Deploy could not help but vent his frustration.
Every life must come a little pain, and off-road racers are not spared little trials and tribulations. Kobus van Tonda and son-in-law Freddie Krill have had their share of trials and tribulations so far this season, but produced a workmanlike run to complete the top 10 in the Unifred Ford Ranger. The top 10 places in the prologue were all entrants in the Premier SP class, with reigning South African champions Dion Venter and Ian Palmer setting the pace in Class D in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. Venter and Palmer were 26 seconds clear of Louis Weichelt and Francis Bourgema in the N1 4x4 Toyota Land Cruiser. The experienced Weichelt boasts a win on the Toyota 1000 Desert Race on his curriculum vitae as a co-driver, and Bourgema were having their first outing of the season together. The Class D cars are powered by 6-cylinder engines, but off-road regulations restrict Class E competitors to 4-cylinder power plants. This often makes for tough going for the Class E brigade, with leaders Diederik Hatting and Christo Bosman in the Transcore Toyota Hilux, finishing nearly 18 minutes behind Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin.
Back at race headquarters, hard-working technicians were busy readying their chargers for battle the next day, while crews held post-mortems and mulled over last-minute strategies for the race.
It's going to be an interesting one. You know, it's virgin territory for everybody, but you know, we've got a good car underneath us. The Castrol Toyota is going superbly well, and I think it's going to be interesting. I just hope that I have a finish this time, and I hope it's at the front end of the field.
Yeah, I must say I didn't thought we were going to be second, but yeah, I must say I think it's an advantage at this point of time. Today I say the route was very rough, very, very rough. So some places you must be calm, otherwise you will break the buck easy.
I'm very surprised, and I think it's a very good route. You know, it's totally different from any of the other races, and it's unbelievable. And the spectators we had today, it's also very, very nice to see new faces and meet new people.
Pressure is an ever-present companion for off-road crews, but on this event, Atlas Copco teams carried their sponsors' expectations.
Yeah, especially. That's our event, and I think the pressure
sometimes unnecessary, but in this case, for the sponsor, we'll give it their best.
There were no sponsor expectations for Marius and Jolinde Fourie to worry about, but leading the Class P Championship had its own measure of pressure.
Ja, dit is, maar is baie lekker. Ek hou baie meer van nationals. Dit is meer kompetisie, baie meer.
Dat is baie sterk competitie.
Ja, nee, baie.
En tactiek vir die naweek?
Nee, wat, ons probeer maar die roadbook volg en op die pad te bly en dis maar wat ons kan klaarmaak.
For reigning champions and current championship leaders Collie and Quinton Sewald in the Elegant Fuel Bat consolidation was at the top of the agenda.
Yeah, look, the championship's still in the very early stages, so we're not really looking at that at the moment. But yeah, we're gonna go out and hope for the best result we can get, and maybe if we add some points at each event, maybe to the end of the year it counts, and we're looking forward to this event.
The Sewalds took to the Atlas Copco 400 an overall 11-point lead over Marius and Jolinde Fourie, with another Class P crew in Colin Matthews and Alan Smith in third place.
I made a mistake. He's still in the draw. He gets one. He just gets one. He just gets one. It's my fault. I told him he was starting sixth, so I think he thought he didn't have to come. Okay. Are you drawing for it?
We're first on the road again. As you know, we pull from 1 to 5. It's a lotto, and no one's as good as me when it comes to pulling number one. So we were told that we were actually out of the top 5, so we never came to the draw. We were on our way to driver's briefing, and when you're not there, our president will pull on your behalf. And it's the second time he's pulled on my behalf, and it's the second time he's pulled number one for us. So we left the pits comfortably knowing we were 6th on the road, and we've just walked into the news that we are actually first on a road that we've at a race that we've never been to. So we're going to have to get very wise and be very clever. And luckily I've got a good navigator, and we're going to go and give it our best.
The plight of Evan Hutchison at the prologue draw brought a touch of humour to proceedings, but there were more surprises to come. Along with the other runners, KwaZulu-Natal crew Lance Three and Carl Wichmann in the LT earth-moving bat had no idea of what to expect out on the route. It was a level playing field, but Three and former quad racer Wichmann, who were having their first national outing of the season, upstaged the regular ABSA championship runners by taking pole position in the special vehicle category. The KZN pair finished a healthy 1 minute and 17 seconds ahead of reigning champions and current championship leaders Collie and Quinton Sewald, with both crews reporting clean runs on a route turning out to be a lot tougher than what was expected.
It was also encouraging to see groups of enthusiastic school children enjoying the action. And there was another surprise when Mpumalanga crew Bula Bottas and Johan Pretorius followed up 5th place on the Toyota Dealer 400 by taking 3rd place on the Atlas Copco 400 Prologue in the Bottas Vervoer Bat. Bottas and Pretoria were just 1 second behind the champions and had 18 seconds to spare over a second Sewald father and son crew in Herman and Richard Sewald in the Sewald Racing SVR. Another father and son pairing in Nick and Ryan Harper took the motorride bat to within a second of the Sewalds, and only 20 seconds separated 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th.
Former kart racer Richard Fuller has made an immediate impression in his rookie season in off-road racing, and along with experienced co-driver Jeff Minnett, set the pace in Class P. The Atlas Copco pair finished on the Class P podium on the Toyota Dealer 400 in Mpumalanga and were 70 seconds ahead of Swaziland crew John Thompson and Clinton McNamara in Azarko. Thompson and McNamara were hampered by gearbox and fuel pump problems, but showed plenty of character in making the most of the situation. The Swazi crew had 1 minute and 40 seconds in hand over Adenko 400 winners Colin Matthews and Alan Smith, who were delayed by an early puncture. A bent accelerator pedal when the Century Racing CR3 hit a ditch also didn't exactly help their cause.
A little way behind the Century Racing entry, there was another turn-up for the books, with another local crew responsible for upstaging more fancied national championship regulars. Marcus Taylor and Derek Keith have plenty of experience and were leading the Class B charge in the JRE, and it opened up a big gap over brothers Keith and Andrew Macanetti in Azarko. The JRE is a bit long in the tooth, but Taylor and Keith were a little more than 2 minutes ahead of Class B Drivers' Championship leader Keith Macanetti and brother Andrew in Azarko, of much more recent vintage than the aging JRE.
battle to choose between the top 5 cars, matters were delicately poised in the special vehicle category.
I think this morning with the special starting first on the grass and stuff, definitely the later you started, the better your result would have been. Definitely the Buckies have an advantage in the tight grass fields, but there's some rough patches out there where I think we can make up some time. So we'll see. I think tomorrow everybody is on a more level playing field, and we'll see if we can take the overall as well.
Weet jy, daar's stukke wat baie vinnig is en dan is daar dele wat baie rof is wat ek dink die specials makliker hanteer.
I'm very chuffed. We had a great run out there, troublesome run, and yeah, first P home, very chuffed with that, very chuffed with that.
As part of a promotional initiative to help boost off-road racing in KwaZulu-Natal, a number of teams took somewhat apprehensive local journalists for a short spin over a section of the route. For the scribes, it was an eye-opener.
Yeah, and it's unbelievable. I told him that maybe his mind operates differently from mine, because he was too fast, too quick to take turns, man. Believe me, there were turns that I thought, no, we're not going to turn there. But he's too fast, even in the muddy areas. He's too good, man. And it was an awesome experience. I think I'm going to take another ride next time, and I'm more interested in these cars. Believe me, I like it.
Let's roll out the red carpet and go to a place where all that glitters is gold.
I got a golden glow.
And a star is born every minute. Let's pick a card, any card, and conjure up a world of possibilities. Let's go large, defy the rules, and beat the odds.
Reach for your dreams.
Catch our 15 minutes of fame.
Ooh la la.
And shake it like we mean it. Let's go to a place where every seat is front row and has our name on the back. DSTV. Let's go there.
Early morning in the Biggersburg, and the smell of bacon cooking wafted over race headquarters at the Atlas Copco 400, with early risers full of the joys of spring. The pit area was a hive of activity as teams made their final checks, all worked frantically to sort out last-minute problems, and the countdown to the start of race is always an awkward time, with tension starting to build among race teams and enthusiasts. A couple of redcoats wandering around in battle dress were a reminder of the role the Biggersburg region has played in South African history. In the Castrol Toyota pit, there was no hint of the drama of the previous night when technicians burnt the midnight oil to overhaul the engine in the Duncan Foss Rob Howie car.
No, we had a bit of a problem with something in the engine, one of the pistons. We had a bit of a smoky engine 10 to 15 k's from the end. And they opened the engine last night and fixed it. And yeah, I think 4:15 we heard them testing it. So it was a long night for them.
There was also an air of calm around the Trithui team, with Lance Trithui and Carl Wegman set to lead away the special vehicles.
Yeah, we had a good time trial yesterday. I think starting a little bit further back was definitely a little bit of an advantage for us. And this morning, I think with the wet grass, I think the SPs and the four-wheel drive buckies they're going to be up there. And then I think the Sawwalls and the Harpers are definitely the pressure's going to be on today.
A platoon of redcoats were a talking point, but a little midnight oil also had been burnt in the Transcorp pit, where some urgent repairs were needed on the Dedrick Hutton Christo Bosman Toyota Hilux, which was leading Class E.
Between the upper control and the lower control arm on the right-hand side, we bent that arm. But we managed to bring it home, and Donnie fixed it last night, so we're there.
Company, design. Ah!
A short demonstration of 18th century battlefield tactics kept enthusiasts entertained in the last minutes before the start, with a final volley from the Redcoats, the signal for the start of the race, with Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin leading away the field in the Team Castrol Toyota Hilux. The lead Toyota had a start of 51 seconds before the Ford Ranger TDCI of Chris Visser, Jaapie Badenhorst, and the second Castrol Toyota took off within 2 seconds of each other, with the prospect of a three-way battle developing at the front of the field.
local pair Lance Trethewey and Carl Wichmann led away the special vehicles in the LT Earthmovers bat. And up ahead, the expected early battle between the Visser Badenhorst Ford Ranger and the Vos Howie Castrol Toyota Hilux was in full swing. The early stages of the West Loop allowed crews to build up a head of steam before the route tightened up and forced crews to be a little more circumspect. The figure-of-8 format would see competitors complete 2 laps of the West Loop and 2 laps of the more technical East Loop.
Back at the start, competitors were being flagged away according to their Donaldson Prologue times the day before. The switch to real-time racing, as opposed to sending off cars at 2-minute intervals, known as dust gaps, has led to early battles developing throughout the field, and the close racing from the word go has greatly enhanced the entertainment level for spectators.
The first section of the race was run on the Western Loop and followed the same route as the Donaldson Prologue. This section started off at a fast pace and then tightened up through thorny veld and rocky outcrops.
At the front of the field, Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin were setting a hot pace in the Team Castrol Toyota Hilux. After failing to pick up points in the first 2 races of the season, the pair had a point to prove, and first on the road provided them with an opportunity to stretch the lead they earned via the prologue. Reigning champions Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst had closed the gap slightly in the factory Ford Ranger, but were still under pressure from former champion Duncan Vos and Rob Howie in the second of the factory Castrol Toyota Hilux entries.
An ominous sign that all was not well with the Team Ford Ranger, and the first change in the pecking order at the front of the field came when Vos and Howie went past Visser and Badenhorst, who'd come to a halt on the side of the track. That put the 2 Castrol Toyota crews in charge of the early proceedings, with the factory team looking for its first win of the season. Hannes Grobler and Henny Tersteegen started just over 2 minutes behind Taylor and Birkin in 4th in the RFS BMW X3, and the gap between the 2 cars was quickly stretched to over 3 minutes.
At the front of the special vehicle category, Lance Trethewey and Carl Wichmann lost a few seconds when a local resident claimed right of way. That little confrontation was soon settled when the local decided on taking a swim instead. The KZN crews then politely moved over to let Grobler and Tersteegen go steaming past, with the action starting to hot up as little skirmishes started to develop throughout the field.
At least one spectator was in the pound seats, and behind Trethewey and Wichmann, the scene was set for drama. After the prologue, only 20 seconds separated Collie and Quinton Silwald in 2nd and Nick and Ryan Harper in 5th place. Bulla Boetis and Jan Pretorius with a surprise package on the Donaldson Prologue, with the Mpumalanga crew still running 3rd in the Boetis Vervoer bat. Boetis and Pretorius were starting to come under a little pressure from Herman and Wegard Silwald, who were in hot pursuit in their Silwald Racing SVR, and another father and son combination and Nick and Ryan Harper were holding station in their motorized bat. The Harpers were also coming under pressure though from the Toyota Hilux entries of Willem and Dana Vos and Malcolm Koch with Johan Burger. Part of a gaggle of closely bunched cars were Class P leaders Richard Fuller and Jeff Minnett in the Atlas Copco bat, and teammates Gary Bertolt with Andre Vermeulen in their Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux.
New talent is welcomed with open arms in the ABSA Off-Road Championship, and Richard Fuller has made a big impression since making his debut for the Atlas Copco team on the Adenko 400 at the start of the season. Partnered by the highly experienced Jeff Minnett, the former kart racer was on the Class P podium in only his 2nd race and looks to be a driver for the future.
KwaZulu-Natal enthusiasts were looking for a good performance from Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell, with the Gibson Racing Porter running steadily around 2.5 minutes behind the leaders. The KZN pair were running just ahead of the Toyota Dealer 400 winners Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson in the Regent Racing Navara. The brothers-in-law started the day lying 2nd in the Production Vehicle Championship and take a measured approach to their racing, with consistency a major weapon. Chasing after the Regent Racing entry were brothers Brett and Steve Parker in a Jimco, and Swaziland crew John Thompson with Clinton McNamara, who were running 2nd in Class P in a Zarko.
Looking to make up early ground after a disappointing Donaldson prologue were Chris Deploy and Henk Janse van Vieren in the new RFS BMW X3. There were one or two anxious moments for the pair, but they were pushing hard and made up one place when they picked off Reg Sutton and Rob Gurney in a Zarco Light. A little device known as a screamer warns cars ahead of a fast-approaching vehicle and came into action when Deploy and Janse van Vieren closed in on the Atlas Copco backed of Johan van Staden and James Rousseau.
Van Staden and Rousseau plenty of warning that someone behind them was in a hurry, and one Pretoria crew politely moved out of the way for another. Van Staden and Rousseau are the reigning Class P champions and have yet to come to terms with the new Atlas Copco Spec 5 bat running in Class A. They were 4.5 minutes down on the leaders and were being closed down by a flying Jenny Zahos and Stefan Kutsia, who'd made up a couple of places and had moved ahead of Reg Sutton and Rob Gurney in the Zarco Light.
The Harry Smith pair of Cobus van Tonder and son-in-law Freddie Creel have not had much luck this season. After moving over for Colin Matthews and Alan Smith, the Unifreight Ford Ranger crew were in trouble again. This time it was malfunctioning windscreen wipers that were holding up the pair. Up ahead of the Unifreight Ford, local crew Arthur Barnes and Anthony Usher were rapidly being caught by Class P flyers Colin Matthews and Alan Smith in the Century Racing CR3. The Adenco 400 winners were 3 minutes behind Class P leaders Richard Fuller and Jeff Minnett and pushing hard to make up time after problems on the prologue. With their windscreen wiper problem hampering visibility, Cobus van Tonder and Freddie Creel were struggling to find a rhythm and maintain a steady pace in the Unifreight Ford Ranger.
There was still an early morning chill, but the racing was fast and furious with the Team Ford Racing Ranger of Lance Woolridge and Ward Huxtable under pressure from Class D leaders Louis Weichelt and Francis Boersma in the N1 4x4 Toyota Land Cruiser. Perseverance is a watchword for brothers Keith and Andrew Machanete, who'd taken over the lead in Class B in the Zarco, with the siblings running just ahead of local pair Mark Saru and Don Blakey in a Pro Yisco. Behind them, Mpumalanga brothers Johan and Werner Horn had moved into second place in the Class D in the Malalan Toyota Land Cruiser, while Dedrick Hutting and Christo Bosman were still leading Class E and going along steadily in the Transcore Toyota Hilux.
The route back to the designated service point at race headquarters was a lot tighter and more technical, with crews having to keep their concentration.
At the front of the field, the Team Castrol Toyota pair of Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin was still in the lead, but a terrific tussle developed between the two Team Castrol Toyota Hilux entries. Behind Taylor and Birkin, teammates Duncan Foss and Rob Howie were now in a menacing position. The 51-second lead that Taylor and Birkin enjoyed at the start had gradually been whittled away, and former South African champions Foss and Howie were now within touching distance of their teammates. It was a cat-and-mouse game, with Foss and Howie putting the squeeze on Taylor and Birkin.
No team orders in the Castrol Toyota squad, and Taylor Birkin and Force Howie were left to fend for themselves. It was a thrilling little cameo performance from two highly experienced crews. Taylor and Force are both South African circuit racing champions, and the two of them have been around the block a couple of times. The two Castrol Toyota Hilux double cabs were finally realizing their potential, and the two crews were clamping a tight hold on the production vehicle category.
On the special vehicle front, matters were also warming up. Lance de Vries and Carl Wegman were still leading in the LT earth-moving bat, but the KZN crew were now under some serious pressure from South African champions Cully and Quinton Sulwalt in the elegant fuel bat. Also in the frame were Herman and Vichard Sulwalt, who were on a charge in their Sulwalt Racing SVR, and only seconds separated the top three crews. There was action aplenty for spectators, with Nick and Ryan Harper in touch with the leading trio in their motorbike bat.
With Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst losing time in the Team Ford Ranger, Hannes Grobler and Henk ter Steege have moved into third place in the production vehicle category in the RFS BMW X3. There were sections of the route that had to be tackled with a great deal of circumspection, with crews like Grobler and ter Steege calling on years of experience. The RFS BMW was around 3 minutes behind the leaders, but running strongly. Behind the BMW, the Rustenburg-based father and son team of Willem and Dana Vos was still holding down fourth place, but their pace had slowed. An electric radiator fan on the Vossies Toyota Hilux was playing up, and the pair were nursing the car towards the designated service point.
It was a big blow for the enthusiastic privateers from the Northwest Province, with their fifth place on the Donaldson Prologue an indication of the potential to trouble the front runners. The Rustenburg crew were being chased by Richard Fuller and Jeff Minnett, who were still in control of Class P in the Atlas Copco Bat. Fuller and Minnett had a comfortable cushion between them and the next Class P car, but hot on their heels were Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell, with the Gibson Racing Porter sounding very healthy indeed.
Some interesting battles had developed throughout the field, and Gary Bertholdt and Andre Vermeulen moved up a notch when they took the Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux ahead of the Toyota Hilux of Malcolm Koch and Johan Berger. Koch's father Andre was a star driver in years gone by, and the Northwest pair did not put up much resistance, with Bertholdt and Vermeulen carrying sponsor expectations and desperate to break into the top 5. Behind this battle, Toyota Dealer 400 winners Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson were content to let Brett and Steve Parker go by, with both cars passing the stricken Ford Ranger of Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst. Whitehouse and Carlson were putting together another of their trademark performances and were now on the fringes of the top 5 in the production vehicle category. Just behind the Regent Racing Nissan Navara, Chris Deploy and Henk Janssen van Vieren were desperate for a good result in the petrol version of the 2 BMW X3 entries running under the RFS banner. The car was having only its second outing, with the crew hoping for a clean run free of teething problems.
Off-road races don't often take prisoners, and Jimmy Zaas and Stefan Coetzee muscled the Cobalt Racing Porter ahead of the Atlas Copco Bat of Johan van Staden and James Rousseau. The fast but erratic Zaas and Coetzee were long gone when Chris Deploy and Henk Janssen van Vieren moved over to let Johan van Staden and James Rousseau move ahead of the RFS BMW.
The Parker brothers are a cheerful pair who enjoy their racing. They were running around 4.5 minutes behind the lead Class A car and looked to be enjoying themselves. The Parkers had moved ahead of the Boertes Vervoer Bat of Bulle Boertes and Johan Pretorius, who were struggling with intercom problems and an odometer that was playing up, and from third at the start, they had dropped back to 8 minutes behind the special vehicle leaders. At the other end of the scale, Regent Racing Jimco pair Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson were back in the Class P frame, and after a disappointing Donaldson prologue, a steady run and retirements had moved them up the pecking order.
It wasn't turning out to be a good day for Kobus van Tonde and Freddie Kriel in the Unifreight Ford Ranger. The Harry Smith pair were now around 18 minutes off the pace set by the production vehicle leaders and were under attack from Evan Hutchison and Donnie Stassen, who had problems of their own in the 4x4 Motorride Revo. Former SA champion Hutchison and Stassen were battling suspension and power steering problems, while the Unifreight Ford's windscreen wiper problem had now reached crisis proportions. Hutchison and Stassen made use of the Screamer device to get past the Unifreight Ford, and body language inside the cab set it all for Van Tonde and Kriel, who made an unscheduled pit stop at the end of the loop to fix the wiper problem.
The father and son pair of Hugo and Jaap de Bruin were another crew to make up useful ground after a disappointing prologue. After sitting out the 2010 season, the de Bruins were making only their second appearance of the year, but were looking solid and had moved into the top 10 in the Premier SP class in the Mikarin XL Toyota Hilux.
There was also a solid look about Northwest crew Jannie Visser and Yorks Leroux in the International Toyota Hilux. Visser is the brother of Chris Visser, and the former Class E champions already had a podium finish to their names this season at the Adenko 400. Steaming up behind the Visser-Leroux combination were Louis Weichelt and Francis Boersma, who were in control of Class D after the early retirement of reigning champions Dion Venter and Ian Palmer in a 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. Weichelt and Boersma were being chased by John Thompson and Clinton McNamara in a Zarko, with the Swaziland crew running third in Class P. A little further back, brothers Keith and Andrew Maganete, still going along steadily in another Zarko, were in charge of Class B, where there had been a high rate of attrition.
For Mpumalanga-based brothers Johan and Werner Horn, the race ended in dramatic fashion when they managed to toss the Mullerline Toyota Land Cruiser onto its side. A little outside assistance was needed to get the Toyota back on its wheels, but the Horns' day was over.
They've come and gone. They've seen new faces rise and old rivals taste defeat. They've made history and called it quits. And here, their legend still lives on. Wimbledon, live from 20 June. Exclusive to Supersport. Brought to you by Spa.
They say it's the world's most grueling sport. So we thought we'd make it a little easier for you. Join us each week as we bring you up-to-the-minute news on current events, tips from the pros, and review the latest technology to keep you ahead of the pack. Watch Super Cycling every Tuesday and enjoy the journey without the pain. Only on Supersport, and brought to you by MedScheme.
The Atlas Copco 400 continues. The second loop of the tough route to the east of Dundee was more demanding than the west. The loop included a fast section through a research farm and then tightened up even more with a river crossing, dry riverbeds and rocky outcrops, all making for a difficult route demanding intense concentration from crews.
At the front of the production vehicle field, the battle between Team Castrol Toyota teammates Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin and Duncan Force and Rob Howie was still in full swing. The two Toyotas were tied together with the advantage swaying back and forth as they took turns leading.
It was breathtaking stuff, but something had to give, and it all ended in an anticlimax when Taylor and Birkin picked up a puncture that handed the advantage to Duncan Foss and Rob Howie. It had been great while it lasted, and it was a huge advertisement for off-road racing, but Foss and Howie were now in the box seats and completely in control of proceedings. But for how long?
Not to be outdone, the Special Vehicle Brigade were putting on a little cameo performance of their own, with the two Sulwald teams slugging it out. Herman and Richard Sulwald had taken the Sulwald Racing SVR to the front of the field, but only seconds behind them were Cully and Quinton Sulwald in the Elegant Fuel Bat. It was a family feud, with brothers and cousins trading blows. Herman and Cully won the SA Championship more than a decade ago, and both are now racing with their sons, with Cully and Quinton SA champions in 2007 and 2010.
Local crew Lonstra 3 and Carl Wichmann were still holding on to third in the LT Earthmovers Bat, but it now slipped more than 2.5 minutes behind the two Sulwald teams. Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin were back in action, but the puncture had cost them more than 3 minutes, and it once again drove home the point that in a highly competitive category of racing, the slightest mishap can severely cost you. The Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux of Gary Bertelt and Andre Vermeulen was poised for a podium finish after moving ahead of the RFS BMW X3 of Hannes Grobler and Henny Terstegen, which was battling a power steering problem. It was a gremlin that would later sideline Grobler and Terstegen, who started their season off with a great win.
Rookie driver Richard Fuller and Jeff Minute were still leading Class P in the Atlas Copco Bat, and it moved ahead of the motorbike bat of Nick and Ryan Harper, who had lost time when they wrong slotted. The more powerful Class A car was closing in on Fuller and Minute, and when the Atlas Copco Bat lost momentum at a dip, a little nudge from the Harpers persuaded them to move out the way.
That little move put the Hoffers back into 4th place in the special vehicle category, with Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell still running strongly in the Gibson Racing Porter. The local crew had not put a wheel wrong, but were 5 minutes down on the Silwa teams, who were setting an absolutely cracking pace.
The Region Racing Nissan Navara of Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson was into the top 5 in the production vehicle category. A little deviation from the route cost them a few seconds, but they were well clear of the likes of Yanni Visser and Joks Leroux and the De Bruins. With a road book, GPS and route markings, it is still possible to stray from the course.
The Parker brothers were still running strongly in the Jimco, with the pair starting to look likely candidates for a top 5 finish in the special vehicle category. Although they were 10 minutes adrift of the leaders, it was an encouraging performance from the siblings, who were running comfortably ahead of some more fancied crews. One of those was the Atlas Copco bat of Johan van Staden and James Rousseau, with the reigning Class P champions about 10 seconds adrift of the Parkers after a steady, if unspectacular, drive.
Steady, if unspectacular, could also be used to describe the performance of Bulla Bottas and Johan Pretorius, who started the day in 3rd place. They were 12 minutes behind the leaders, but did not look to be in any trouble. That was not the case with Jimmy Zaus and Stefan Kutsia, who had parked the Cobalt Racing Porter and were walking back to the main road for a rendezvous with their service crew.
With Richard Fuller and Jeff Minnett struggling with a clutch problem in the Atlas Copco bat, a dogged performance from Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson had taken the Regent Racing Jimco to within 1 minute and 13 seconds of the Class P leaders. Malcolm Koch and Johan Burger were still making steady progress in the Toyota Hilux, and not far behind them were veterans Yanni Visser and Joks Leroux, again demonstrating how to go about grinding out another good result in their international Toyota Hilux.
After a dodgy start to the season, former SA champion Evan Hutchison and Dani Stassen scored an encouraging result on the Toyota Dealer 400. They picked up a place on the road when they took the Motorite Revo past the Mickelin XL Toyota Hilux of Hijo and Jaap de Bruin. Both the Motorite car and the Toyota were experiencing power steering problems, but were comfortably ahead of Daniel and Lozili, who were out in the ex-Shamir Variawa Porter. Next up were Swaziland pair John Thompson and Clinton McNamara, with the pair nearly 14 minutes off the Class P pace.
Problems on the prologue forced Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar to start from the back of the field in the Century Racing CR4. The car is built to Dakar Rally specifications, with plans for the CR4 to be entered in the 2-wheel drive category in the Long Distance Classic in 2012. Corbett and Balzar were running just ahead of Louis Weichelt and Francis Boersma in the N1 4x4 Toyota Land Cruiser. Behind the Class D leaders and making good progress through the field were Terence Marsh and George Smallberger, who started from the back of the field in the Regent Racing Nissan Navara after breaking a differential in the prologue. Also making great progress after starting from the back of the field after prologue woes were championship leaders Thomas Rundle and Johan Moore in the Baden Nissan Navara. Their mission was to salvage as many points as possible and to hold on to their advantage at the top of the championship standings.
At the compulsory 15-minute stop at the end of the second loop, race orders saw to it that the stage was set for drama in both the production and special vehicle categories.
Yeah, so far we've had a really good run. The second half has been a bit tricky, a lot of rocks, so you've got to be really careful in those areas. But the car's perfect and the route's really well marked, so far so good.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting route. We're having a lot of fun. Unfortunately, we have a bit of an alternator problem at the moment, so hopefully we can get that fixed now and go out on the second lap and see what we can do.
Very interesting. It's extremely rough. It's treacherous. It's probably the roughest race that we've had in a long time. Got our work cut out for us out there. We unfortunately had overheating. We were coming in third. We just let Hannes pass because the car was overheating. We didn't want to hold him up, but hopefully we can go out there and have a good go.
It's fantastic. It's a great race. There's lots of good mud. And no, the terrain is fantastic. The marking's good. And the best part is the racing is close. So, you know, everybody's very close to each other. So it's a great day's racing.
Keep an eye on what your kids are watching with DSTV's parental control feature.
We're at a very critical age.
Simply press the menu key, select parental control, and enter your PIN code. Then, depending on your decoder model, select either blocking option or PG status. Scroll to parental levels, select the age restriction of your choice, and accept these settings. Your decoder will now block all programs outside your selected age restriction. To view a blocked program, simply press OK and enter your PIN code again. DSTV, so much more control.
Every try sweeter. Every vista more breathtaking. Every moment more memorable. Welcome to the TV you love in high definition. Now more affordable with Macro's incredible HD entertainment bundle, including a Samsung 40-inch LCD TV, DSTV HD PVR decoder, plus a Drifter mobile decoder, all for only 6,999 Rand. That's a saving of over 1,000 Rand. Stocks are limited, so hurry to your nearest Macro store now. DSTV, so much more.
The Atlas Copco 400 continues, and here's a little secret. If you want a little extra entertainment at an off-road race, the trick is to find a mud hole along the route, and the more mud, the better. Just such a location midway into the west loop of the Atlas Copco 400 drew a large and enthusiastic crowd to enjoy themselves. Production car leaders Duncan Foss and Rob Howie were the first car on the scene and did not hesitate to charge into action. There was a moment when it looked as though they would bog down when the Castor Toyota found traction, and Foss and Howie were soon on safer ground.
While Foss and Howie were safely on their way, special vehicle leaders Herman and Vichard Suwald were not as lucky. They bogged down, but a team of well-drilled volunteers were on hand to spring into action and rescue the Suwald Racing SVR. With Cully and Quinton Suwald retiring after the second loop, Nick and Ryan Harper were now second in the special vehicle category, and the Motorway crew also needed a helping hand after a spectacular display.
The Harpers were nearly 3.5 minutes down on Herman and Vichard Solvat, but in the mudhole spinning competition, they were a tough act to follow. Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin could not match the Motorride crew for entertainment value, but also needed a helping hand from the volunteers, who looked as though they'd been practicing this routine for weeks on end.
Local crews Lance Trethewey and Carl Wichman and Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell must know a thing or two about KwaZulu-Natal mudholes. Both crews sailed through the obstacle with no problem at all and were now third and fourth in the special vehicle category behind the Suwald and Harper father and son teams. Back on firmer ground, Gary Bertholdt and Andre Vermeulen were still looking at a podium finish in the Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux. Johan van Staden and James Rousseau were also keeping the Atlas Copco flag flying, but the Pretoria-based crew were heading for another disappointing result, with retirement just round the corner. The Parkers also saw their hopes of a good finish disappear when they hit a gate.
Retirement of Hannes Grobler and Henny Terstege in the RFS BMW, the Regent Racing Navara of Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson was into the top 5 in the production vehicle category. Meanwhile, back at the mudhole, Bulla Boertes and Johan Pretorius took a leaf out of the Trethewey Gibson book and sailed through with no problems. The retirement of Richard Fuller and Jeff Millett in the Atlas Copco bat had also promoted the Regent Racing Jimco of Archie Rutherford and Michael Lawrence into first in Class P, and behind them, Yanni Visser and Yorks Leroux were grinding out a result, along with John Thompson and Clinton McNamara, who were in second place in Class P.
On the final loop of the race east of Dundee, the Castrol Toyota Hilux of Duncan Force and Rob Howie was firmly in control of the production vehicle category, with the factory team looking at their first win of the season. Herman and Wichard Sulwald were in much the same boat in the Sulwald Racing SVR at the front of the special vehicle field and were in a comfort zone.
Tucked in behind the Sulwalds were Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin, with the factory Castrol Toyota team looking set for a crushing 1-2 result. There were still some tricky parts of the course to negotiate, but the two Castrol Toyotas had stamped their authority down on proceedings in the production vehicle category. Nick and Ryan Harper are a team that take a measured approach to their racing, and a no-frills performance had taken the Motorrad Bat into a solid second place. Behind the Harpers, there had been a change in order, with Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell producing a late charge to take the Gibson Racing Porter into third, ahead of Lonster 3 and Carl Wichmann in the little battle between the two KZN crews.
After starting the day in pole position, Lance Trethewey and Carl Wichmann gradually slipped back as the day wore on. The Sulwalds, the Harpers and Gibson and Campbell gradually wore them down, while disappointment for Atlas Copco, with the late retirement of Gary Bertholdt and Andre Vermeulen, lifted Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson into third place and was a boost for the Regent Racing team's championship hopes.
Perseverance paid off for Bula Boertes and Johan Pretorius, who were headed for their second top 5 finish in a row. They started third, slipped back during the day, and then fought back before coming under a little late pressure from Class P leaders Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson in the Regent Racing Gymco. Evan Hutchison and Donnie Stassen stuck to their guns to score a second finish in the 4x4 Motorrad Revo. They were plagued by suspension and power steering problems, but they kept plugging away. It was a difficult day for John Thompson and Clinton McNamara, but they ground out a good result to finish second in Class P. Behind them, there were late problems for Yanni Visser and Yorks Leroux, with the International Toyota Hilux running out of steam in a lengthy stretch of muddy track.
A steady performance combined with late retirements helped lift Hicho and Jaap de Bruin into the top 5 in the production vehicle category in the Mickelin XL Toyota Hilux. Daniel and Lo Zili were chasing after the de Bruins in the ex-Shamir Variawa Porter and lost a few seconds sorting out gears.
The Zeelies had managed to restore forward momentum and were underway again when there was a little bit of late drama for Malcolm Koch and Johan Berger, when a little over-exuberance saw them rearrange the Toyota Hilux's front end. It was a costly error because the drive of the day saw Thomas Rundle and Johan Moore fight from the back of the field to the fringes of the top 5. The pair gave Yanni Visser and Yorks Leroux a wide berth, and before the finish sneaked in ahead of Koch and Berger to salvage valuable championship points. A pair of youngsters picked up debut from the Koch-Berger Toyota, while Congo crew Eduardo and Ricardo Argazi cruised along in the strange-looking ARG Dragon, which had not missed a beat all day. A tractor arrived on the scene to rescue Yanni Visser and Yorks Leroux, who were up to their knees in mud, and there was one more little drama to be played out on this portion of the route. While Yorks Leroux showed a turn of speed to tend to sorting out towing details, Nick Gosler and Andrew Massey arrived on the scene at a rate of knots to make a spectacular entrance to the stretch of mud that had caught out Visser and Leroux.
A first outing of the season turned out to be a profitable one for Louis Weichelt and Francis Boedsma, who won Class D in the N1 4x4 Toyota Land Cruiser, with Deirdre Cutting and Christo Bosman giving Toyota a clean sweep of the classes by taking the Class E honours in the Transcore Toyota Hilux.
KZN crew Don Thompson and Wayne Foster also salvaged Class B championship points in a 6-sounding Zarko after starting right from the back of the field. They were followed by the Land Rover brothers Jack and Cyril Oosthuizen, who increased their championship lead by finishing second in Class D. There was a high rate of attrition in Class B, where local crew Leon Botma and Quinton Brand were the only crew to see out the distance in an aging bat.
A large crowd had gathered at race headquarters at the Battlefields Lodge to welcome home the winners, with Duncan Force and Rob Howie giving the Castrol Toyota team its first victory of the season. The Toyota Cup overflowed when Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin brought the second factory car home in second place, and there were congratulations all round.
After wins for BMW and Nissan privateer teams, it was a long overdue victory for the Castrol Toyota squad, with Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson completing the top 3 in the Regent Racing Nissan Navara.
It was fantastic. You know, the local farmers put in a lot of effort. They'd mowed the lawn, and had they not done that, I'm afraid a lot of the cars would have just broken, because you're driving blind and you can't race like that. So it was really a privilege to race here, and they've really gone to a lot of effort, and I hope they got as much enjoyment out of today as we have.
In the final results, the Castrol Toyota domination was highlighted by the gaps behind the Force Howie and Taylor Birkin entries. 7 of the top 10 came from the SP class, with 2 from Class D and 1 from Class E.
There was a warm welcome for Herman and Richard Silwald when they put the finishing touches to victory in the special vehicle category in their Silwald Racing SVR. Another father and son combination in Nick and Ryan Harper was second in the motorized bat, with local crew Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell claiming the final podium spot. For the Silwalds, it had not exactly been plain sailing.
Yeah, we had a pretty fair day, good day. We had a little bit of problems with the probes on the car. We've lost the trip meters for most of the race, but Vicha did a very good job of keeping us there. On the first east loop, we've lost the comms between ourselves, and that was a bit difficult, trying to navigate with the GPS only and without comms. So we've lost a bit of time there, but apart from that, we had a good run, and the car did pretty well. The house prepared it very well, and Vicha did a good job, so we're very happy.
Herman and Richard Silwald had over 4 minutes in hand at the finish, but just 26 seconds separated the next 3 cars. 3 Class B entries finished in the top 10, with Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson a credible 6th.
With plenty of crowd support and stiff competition out on the course, Bernie Hanneray, CEO of Atlas Copco Compressor Technique, was also a very happy man.
Yeah, it has been a good day. I think there's been a good crowd, and I think from the Atlas Copco's point of view, I think it's been a very successful day. Spoken to 1 or 2 of the competitors, and they certainly seem to think that the competition today was pretty awe-inspiring.
The ABSA award for the team of the day went to the Motorride team, with a cheque for 5,000 Rand going to hospice.
We had a good day, good, long, tough day. Unfortunately for us, it was just a race of trying to get to end to salvage some points. But the fact that we've now managed to raise 5,000 Rand for hospice is fantastic. You know? I'm sure that'll go to a good cause. Yeah, good idea.
The next race on the ABSA Off-Road Championship calendar will be the Toyota 1000 Desert Race in Botswana from June the 24th to the 26th.
Catch the action on Supersport, your world of champions.